You know how people always say that family is supposed to be your safe harbor, the one place where you can let your guard down, even when the rest of the world feels like it's closing in. I used to believe that too, until a single afternoon at my doctor's office showed me that loyalty can be the most fragile illusion of all. I sat there in that quiet exam room overlooking the Cumberland River, the water glittering under the late morning sun, trying to steady my breathing while the monitor beeped softly beside me. My name is Isabella Reed. I am 29 years old, and I had built a life I was proud of, one that I thought was solid enough to weather anything. But that day, everything I believed about the people closest to me began to crack in ways I never saw coming. I run a thriving talent management and event production company here in Nashville. We specialize in helping up-and-coming country artists navigate the industry while producing intimate riverfront concerts and corporate events right from venues I own along the Cumberland. It started as a small operation out of my apartment 8 years ago, just me and a laptop booking gigs and managing schedules. Today, the company employs a full team, holds exclusive contracts with several major labels, and generates steady seven-figure revenue. I made sure every piece of intellectual property, the artist development programs, the proprietary event software, the branding systems, was locked away in a separate holding company that only I control. I did it quietly, methodically, because I had learned early that success attracts all kinds of attention, even from the people who are supposed to cheer you on the loudest. My husband had always been supportive on the surface. He worked in finance downtown and liked to talk about how we were building something together. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, had opinions about everything. She never missed an opportunity to remind me how fortunate I was to have married into the Reed family, as if my own accomplishments were somehow secondary to the last name I now carried. My father-in-law stayed mostly in the background, nodding along to whatever my mother-in-law said. My sister-in-law was pleasant enough during holidays, but she had her own life across town. Then there were the people I truly counted on, my best friend and former business partner, Olivia Grant, who had been with me since the very first client, and my trusted business advisor, Marcus Hale, who helped me structure the company the right way. And of course my colleague, Liam Brooks, who ran day-to-day operations so I could focus on the creative side. The health scare itself came out of nowhere. I had been pushing hard for weeks to close a major label deal, working late nights at the estate I bought 3 years ago with my own money. The riverfront mansion sits on a quiet stretch of the Cumberland, with floor-to-ceiling windows that let the water and the city's skyline fill every room. I loved the peace it gave me, but the stress finally caught up. One morning I felt lightheaded during a conference call. Then everything went fuzzy. My husband insisted on driving me to the clinic himself. Dr. Elena Vargas ran the usual tests and told me it was likely exhaustion combined with high blood pressure, nothing life-threatening, but a clear warning sign that I needed to slow down. She wanted to keep me for observation for a few hours. That was when the confrontation began. I was still in the exam room, sipping water and trying to process the doctor's words, when the door opened and my mother-in-law walked in, followed closely by my husband. I hadn't asked them to come. My husband must have called her on the drive over. My mother-in-law's face was tight with concern that quickly shifted into something sharper the moment she saw me sitting there in the hospital gown. "Isabella, sweetheart, we need to talk about this business of yours," my mother-in-law said, pulling up a chair without waiting for an invitation. Her voice was calm, almost soothing, but I knew that tone. It was the one she used right before she made her expectations crystal clear. "You can't keep running yourself into the ground like this. My husband and I have been discussing it, and it's time we stepped in to help protect what you've built. For the family." My husband stood behind her, nodding, his hand resting on her shoulder, like they had rehearsed this. "Babe, the doctor just said you need to cut back. We can handle some of the paperwork, maybe consolidate a few assets so you're not carrying everything alone." I looked from one to the other, my pulse still a little unsteady from the episode. Consolidate, how I asked, quietly, keeping my voice even. I had learned long ago that reacting emotionally only gave them more ammunition. My mother-in-law leaned forward, her manicured hand covering mine on the blanket. "We're family, Isabella. My husband has been looking into the finances, and it turns out some of the event contracts and venue rights were listed under joint accounts we set up when you two got married. It only makes sense to formalize that now, put everything under one umbrella so there's no question about ownership if anything happens to you. We'd never let the company slip away from the family. The words landed like a quiet punch. Joint accounts, I had never agreed to anything like that for the core business assets. Those were protected. I felt a flicker of unease, but I kept my face neutral. Dr. Vargas stepped back in, then politely asking them to give me space, but my mother-in-law waved her off with that practiced smile she reserved for doctors and waitstaff. See, even the doctor agrees you need support. My mother-in-law continued smoothly as if the interruption had never happened. You've done an amazing job, but a woman in your position can't do it all forever. My husband has the financial expertise. We can make this official today, sign a few simple documents while we're all here. It's the responsible thing. My husband pulled a folder from the briefcase he had brought with him. I hadn't even noticed it until now. Just a couple of transfer forms to make the holding company cleaner. He said, his tone gentle, almost apologetic. Nothing you haven't seen before. It protects you, Isabella. Protects us. I stared at the papers he slid onto the tray table. My name was on them, but the language felt off phrases about joint ownership and asset consolidation that I had never discussed. My stomach tightened, but I didn't argue. Not yet. Instead, I took a slow breath and thanked them for coming, told them I needed to rest like the doctor ordered. They left after a few more minutes of concerned murmurs, but the air in the room felt heavier once they were gone. Later that afternoon, after Dr. Vargas cleared me to go home with strict instructions to rest and follow up in a week, my husband drove me back to the riverfront estate. The mansion looked the same as always, wide porches, the river sparkling beyond the lawn, the quiet I had worked so hard to earn. But something had shifted. I could feel it in the way my mother-in-law had spoken in the folder my husband had carried like it was already decided. That evening, I sat on the back deck with a cup of herbal tea, watching the lights from downtown Nashville reflect on the water. The health scare had been a wake-up call, but the conversation in the exam room lingered like a shadow. I kept replaying my mother-in-law's words about joint accounts. I knew that wasn't true, or at least I thought I knew. I had built firewalls precisely to prevent exactly this kind of surprise. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. It was a text from Olivia Grant, my oldest friend, and the woman who had helped me land my first big artist 3 years ago. She had moved to a small town outside the city last year to start her own consulting practice, but we still talked almost every day. Hey, heard you had a rough morning. You okay? Also, I need to show you something. Can we video call tonight? I typed back that I was fine and that yes, we could talk. Olivia had always had a sixth sense about when things were off. I didn't tell her about the folder or the joint account claim yet. I wanted to see what she had first. The next morning, Marcus Hale, my business advisor, stopped by the estate unannounced. He usually only came when there was something urgent. We sat in the sunroom overlooking the river while he pulled up files on his laptop. Isabella, I got a preliminary notice from the State Commerce Department yesterday. He said, his voice low and serious. Someone filed paperwork suggesting a change in ownership structure for the holding company. It's not finalized, but the language matches some of the documents my husband asked me about last month. I told him those were off limits. You want me to look deeper. My chest tightened again, the same way it had in the doctor's office. I nodded, keeping my tone calm. Yes, quietly. And Marcus, run a full internal review of every asset. I need to know exactly what's protected and what isn't. He left, promising to have answers by the end of the week. I stood at the window after he drove away the river, moving steadily past my property like it always did. I had always believed that loyalty was something you earned through years of quiet support and shared dreams. But the conversation in that exam room, the folder my husband had carried so casually, the way my mother-in-law had spoken as if my company was already partly theirs, it made me wonder how long the illusion had been cracking. I poured another cup of tea and sat back down. Whatever was coming, I would face it the same way I had built everything else, one careful, deliberate step at a time. The health scare had forced me to slow down, but it had also sharpened my focus. I wasn't going to let fear or family pressure rush me into signing anything I didn't fully understand. That night, Olivia called. Her face filled the screen serious in a way that made my stomach drop. "Isabella, I've been digging around because something my husband said to me last month didn't sit right. I hired a private investigator. Don't get mad, I used my own money. The report just came back. You need to see this." She shared her screen. Rows of documents appeared: financial records, property filings, emails. My eyes scanned the highlights: hidden liens, attempts to list certain venue rights under joint marital property without my signature, conversations between my husband and my mother-in-law about securing the family legacy while I was focused on closing the latest label deal. The loyalty I had counted on the marriage, the in-laws who were supposed to have my back, suddenly looked like nothing more than a carefully maintained illusion. I set my tea down and stared at the river beyond the windows, the water dark and steady under the night sky. The health scare had exposed the first fracture. Olivia's report was about to reveal how deep the cracks really went. The screen lit up with Olivia's familiar face again the next evening, and I answered right away, pulling the phone closer so the river lights behind me cast a soft glow across the deck. She didn't waste time with small talk. Her expression was steady the way it always got when she had something serious to lay out, and she started sharing her screen without asking if I was ready. Rows of documents filled my view: property filings, email threads, bank notations that I had never seen before. My best friend's voice stayed even as she walked me through each one, pointing out the dates and the signatures that didn't belong there. I listened without interrupting, letting the words settle over me like the cool night air drifting off the Cumberland. Olivia explained that the private investigator had uncovered attempts to place liens on 2 of my largest riverfront venues, the ones I had purchased outright 3 years earlier with company funds I alone controlled. The filings listed them under joint marital property, claiming my husband had contributed significantly to the down payments. That was the first lie. He had never put a single dollar into those properties. Then came the emails chains between my husband and my mother-in-law, stretching back almost a year. They discussed how my recent health episode made it the perfect moment to formalize family oversight of the event production company, framing it as protection for me while I recovered. My mother-in-law had even drafted language suggesting the holding company assets should be consolidated under a new family trust she had quietly set up with my husband's help. Olivia paused, giving me space to breathe. "They lied about the assets, Isabella. They told each other you had agreed to joint ownership on the venue contracts last summer when you were traveling for that big label showcase. You never did. The private investigator pulled the actual paperwork. It's all smoke." I set the phone on the table and stared at the water for a long moment, the current moving slow and sure under the distant bridge lights. The loyalty I had counted on the marriage that was supposed to be a partnership, the in-laws who were supposed to celebrate what I built, felt like it was dissolving right in front of me. Yet my voice stayed calm when I finally spoke. "Thank you for doing this. I needed to see it." We ended the call with her promising to send the full report securely, and I sat there a while longer, letting the facts turn over in my mind. The health scare had cracked the door open, but Olivia's evidence showed how long the illusion had been maintained behind my back. I slept little that night yet. By morning, I felt a quiet resolve settle in my chest. I was still the same woman who had turned a one-person operation into a thriving business with exclusive contracts and proprietary systems. No folder or secret filing was going to change that unless I let it. The next morning, Marcus Hale arrived at the estate earlier than usual, carrying his laptop and a thick folder of his own. We settled in the sunroom again, the river sparkling beyond the tall windows. He had already started the internal review I requested. His tone was professional, but I caught the edge of concern when he laid out what he had found so far. Preliminary checks showed unauthorized amendment forms had been submitted to the State Commerce Department for 2 venue rights agreements. The language mirrored exactly what my husband had tried to slide across the tray table in the doctor's office. Marcus confirmed the filings had been stopped because the holding company structure required my personal electronic signature, which had never been provided. "They're moving fast," he said quietly. "The audit I triggered with the external firm is scheduled to begin in 2 days. It will examine every asset transfer attempt from the past 18 months. I can pause it if you want more time to handle things privately." I shook my head, keeping my expression steady. "No, let it run. I want everything documented." Before Marcus could reply, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. I answered on speaker so Marcus could hear, and her voice filled the sunroom, warm at first, layered with that familiar concern she always used when she wanted something. "Isabella, darling, I've been thinking about you nonstop since yesterday. That health scare really opened our eyes. My husband told me how the doctor stressed the need for you to step back. We're family, and families step in when one of us is struggling. I've already spoken with our attorney about updating the trust paperwork to make the transition smoother. You won't have to lift a finger." I felt the words land, but I kept my breathing even. "What transition are we talking about?" She laughed lightly, as if I had asked something obvious. "The company, of course. The event venues, the artist contracts, all of it. It's too much for one person right now, especially after what your body just went through. My husband has the financial background to manage the day-to-day while you rest and heal. We can sign the consolidation papers this afternoon at the estate. I'll bring the notary myself." Marcus glanced at me, his eyebrows raised. I held up a hand to keep him quiet and answered her calmly. "I appreciate the concern, but I'm handling my business the way I always have. The doctor said rest, not hand over control of everything I built." Her tone shifted, then still calm on the surface, but with a sharper undercurrent that told me she had rehearsed this part too. "Sweetheart, you're being stubborn again. This isn't about taking anything from you. It's about protecting the family legacy. My husband and I have been carrying some of the load behind the scenes for months, reviewing contracts, talking to the label people when you were too busy. We only want what's best for all of us, especially now that your health has shown us how fragile things can be." I listened to the way she framed it, turning my independent strength into a liability, making my success sound like a burden the family had to rescue me from. My husband walked into the room halfway through the call, clearly having been looped in already. He stood beside my mother-in-law on the line, adding his own gentle pressure. "Babe, she's right. The audit your advisor mentioned could get messy if we don't get ahead of it. Let us help clean up the paperwork first." The call ended with my mother-in-law promising to come by the estate later that afternoon with the documents just in case I changed my mind. I set the phone down and looked at Marcus. He was already typing notes, his face serious. "This is escalating faster than I expected. The external audit will flag these amendment attempts. Once they see the pattern of unauthorized filings tied to family members, it becomes a compliance issue." I nodded the river outside, moving steadily as always. The health scare had exposed loyalties I thought were solid, but Olivia's report and now Marcus's findings were showing me the full picture. My husband had lied about the assets claiming contributions and joint rights that never existed. My mother-in-law had driven the plan using my moment of vulnerability to push for control. Later that afternoon, while I was reviewing contracts in my home office with the windows open to the water breeze, my sister-in-law stopped by unexpectedly. She had heard about the doctor visit and wanted to check on me, but her visit quickly turned into another layer of pressure. My sister-in-law sat across from me, fidgeting with her coffee cup. "My mother is really worried, you know. She thinks if you don't slow down, you'll burn out completely. And my husband, he's been talking about how the company could run more efficiently under one roof, family roof." I kept my voice reflective, not accusatory. "This isn't about efficiency, it's about who actually built it." She looked uncomfortable, but she didn't argue. Instead, she left with a hug that felt more like an apology than support. By evening, my mother-in-law arrived as promised, carrying a fresh folder and the notary in tow. She walked into the living room like she owned the space, her eyes scanning the river view with that satisfied expression she always wore when she thought she was about to fix something. My husband stood beside her, silent but clearly aligned. "Isabella, we're here because we love you. my mother-in-law began sliding the papers across the coffee table. Sign these and the weight lifts off your shoulders. The venues, the contracts, the holding company interests, they'll be secured under the family trust. No more late nights, no more health scares from carrying it all alone. My husband will handle the business side and you can focus on recovering. I looked at the documents then, at both of them. The room felt smaller despite the high ceilings and open view to the water. I could feel the chaotic swirl of betrayal underneath my calm exterior, the illusion of loyalty shattering piece by piece. But I kept my tone steady. I'm not signing anything tonight. I need time to review everything with my own team. My mother-in-law's smile tightened, but she didn't raise her voice. She simply gathered the papers and stood. My husband looked at me one last time, something like regret flickering across his features, but he followed her out without another word. I walked them to the door myself, the same way I had many times before, only this time there was no invitation to return. The following morning, I sat at my desk in the sunroom, the river beyond the windows, moving with that same steady grace it always had, and picked up the plain white envelope I had set aside the night before. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar, but the postmark was from 6 months earlier, right around the time my husband and my mother-in-law had begun their quiet conversations about family oversight. I opened it slowly, the paper crisp under my fingers, and unfolded the single sheet inside. It was a notarized letter from an attorney who had worked with my mother-in-law years ago on a different family matter. He had written it as a private record, never intending for it to reach me, but somehow it had found its way into my safe among old contracts. The words were calm and factual, yet they changed everything in an instant. The letter detailed how my mother-in-law had once tried to claim partial ownership in her own brother's small construction firm by asserting joint family contributions that never existed, using a temporary health issue he had faced as leverage to pressure him into signing papers. The attorney had advised against it, then warning that such tactics could backfire legally, and he had kept a copy of the correspondence as protection for himself. In the letter, he expressed regret that he had not come forward sooner when he overheard similar discussions about my company during a recent family gathering. He included timestamps from emails and notes showing my mother-in-law directing my husband on how to phrase the joint account story, how to time the pressure around any sign of my vulnerability, and how to present the asset consolidation as concern rather than control. The final paragraph was a quiet affirmation that all my holding company assets, venue rights, and intellectual property had always remained solely mine under the original structure I had built. No joint filings had ever been valid. I read it twice the river light catching the page and felt a profound clarity settle over me. The loyalty I had believed in was indeed a pure illusion, carefully maintained until the health scare gave them the opening they thought they needed. But this letter was the final piece that turned their own lies against them. I called Marcus right away and forwarded it securely. His response was immediate. The external audit team had already flagged the unauthorized amendment attempts, and this new evidence would accelerate the review into a full compliance investigation. The karma of the business audit was striking suddenly, just as the preliminary findings were landing in his inbox that same hour. By mid-afternoon, my mother-in-law and my husband arrived at the estate unannounced, expecting the signing they had pushed for the day before. My mother-in-law carried another folder, her expression one of practiced concern as she stepped into the living room. My husband followed close behind, avoiding my eyes. I invited them to sit with the same calm I had used since the doctor's office, the river view stretching wide behind me like a reminder of everything I had built on my own terms. "Isabella, we're here to make this easy." My mother-in-law began sliding the new papers across the table. "The family trust update is ready. All you have to do is sign, and the stress of running everything alone disappears. My husband will step in fully, and you can focus on your health. We only want what's best for you and for the legacy we all share." I let her finish, then placed the notarized letter from the attorney on top of her folder. My voice remained reflective, steady, without accusation or heat. "I received this today. It shows the pattern of how you have approached family businesses before. It also confirms that none of the asset claims you and my husband have made were ever valid. The venues, the contracts, the holding company, none of it was ever joint. The audit that started this morning has already confirmed the unauthorized filings. My husband shifted in his chair, his face tightening. My mother-in-law's smile faltered for the first time, but she recovered quickly, her tone still calm on the surface. Sweetheart, you're misunderstanding. We were only trying to protect you after the health scare. Families look out for each other. I met her eyes directly. The health scare exposed the loyalties that were already there. The private investigator report from Olivia, the audit results now coming in, and this letter, they all show the same thing. You lied about the assets to gain control. I built this company alone, and I will continue to run it alone. I am not signing anything. The boundaries I am setting today are permanent. You and my husband no longer have any role in my business or in decisions about my health or my future. The room fell quiet except for the distant sound of the river. My mother-in-law's face hardened, but she did not raise her voice. She simply gathered the papers and stood. My husband looked at me one last time, something like regret flickering across his features, but he followed her out without another word. I walked them to the door myself, the same way I had many times before, only this time there was no invitation to return. In the days that followed, the audit wrapped up swiftly and decisively. The State Commerce Department issued formal notices rejecting every unauthorized filing, and the compliance report made it clear that any further attempts would trigger legal consequences. My company remained entirely mind stronger than before because the firewalls I had built years ago held firm. The sudden exposure forced my husband to step back from any involvement in the family finances, and my mother-in-law's influence over the extended family began to fray as the details circulated quietly among those who had once trusted her judgment. Not everything resolved neatly. My sister-in-law distanced herself after the confrontation, saying the family tension had become too much for her to navigate. Even Liam Brooks, one of my longtime colleagues, chose to take a step back from day-to-day operations, citing the personal nature of the situation as a distraction he preferred to avoid. Their decisions carried a quiet sting, a reminder that some trusted allies would choose distance when the lines were drawn so clearly. Yet in that bittersweet space, I found the freedom I had been protecting all along. I sat on the deck most evenings after that, watching the Cumberland reflect the city lights, and reflected on how boundaries had brought a peace I had never known while trying to keep everyone happy. The health scare had been the unexpected catalyst, the private investigator report, the confirmation, the business audit, the sudden reckoning, and the hidden letter, the final truth that shifted the power back where it belonged. I chose myself without guilt, not out of anger, but out of a deep understanding that my life, my work, and my peace were mine to safeguard. The illusion of loyalty had dissolved, but in its place stood something real and lasting, the quiet strength of knowing I no longer owed anyone my future. The estate felt lighter now, the river steady and unchanging, carrying the past away with each current. I had won not by fighting louder or harder, but by refusing to hand over what I had earned. My mother-in-law and my husband lost the control they had tried to seize, and I gained the freedom to move forward on my own terms. There was unresolved tension in the family ties that remained severed, yet that tension no longer weighed on me. Boundaries had brought peace, and choosing myself had brought everything else I needed. Thank you for listening to my story. What would you choose if a health scare suddenly revealed that the people closest to you had been lying about assets and planning to take control of everything you built? Would you sign the papers to keep the peace? Or would you set the boundaries that finally let you breathe?